My name is Raymond Delaney. I'm a 45-year-old civil engineer living in the heart of Asheville, North Carolina. I was sitting in my home office just past midnight when I received the email that would burn the last remaining bridge in my marriage of 13 years. Subject line, "It's better this way." The message was short, cold, surgical. "I've moved your inheritance to my personal account. I'll take care of it properly this time. It's what's best for us." Attached was a blurry photo. My wife Selena stood beside a man I had never seen before, bearded, sun-kissed, and smug, on what looked like a resort balcony. The background was drenched in golden desert light, Arizona. Wineglasses clinked in their hands. Her smile. It wasn't the tired, distant expression I'd grown used to. No, it was the smile she used to give me. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I simply closed the laptop, stood in the dim kitchen light, and stared at the backyard we'd renovated together 4 years ago. The stone-paved patio I had laid down by hand, the outdoor fireplace I built one summer while she sipped iced tea and picked out the cushions. That home wasn't just where we lived, it was what I built for her. For us, and she knew it. The inheritance, $642,000, came from my Uncle Garrett, a man who had raised me like a son after I lost my parents in a highway collision when I was just 15. He left me everything he had with one handwritten note tucked inside the trust. "Build something that outlives you. Don't let anyone talk you out of what's yours." I looked at my phone. No missed calls, no apology. No second email explaining anything, just silence. That was when I knew. She wasn't planning on coming back. Not really, not as my wife. The signs had been building for nearly a year. Selena's wellness business, yoga retreats, essential oil kits, and Instagram quotes about personal energy alignment had taken over her life. At first, I supported it. I even helped design her first in-person retreat space in Asheville's River Arts District. But lately, those weekend retreats turned into week-long getaways. Sedona, Santa Fe, Scottsdale, always the same. Vague schedules, changed passwords, mysterious phone calls, and late-night energy recalibration sessions with her business partner Devin, who I'd never met. 3 months ago, Selena began asking pointed questions about Uncle Garrett's trust fund. "Why don't we move it into a high-yield account together?" she'd asked. "We could use it to scale the business, our future." Something in her tone gave me pause, so I lied. I told her I'd think about it. In truth, I'd already moved the trust into a protected account with layered security and a separate identity structure. A quiet decision. One she didn't know I'd made because something inside me had already started preparing for this day, and now here it was. What she didn't know, what she still doesn't know, is that the money she tried to steal wasn't where she thought it was. That inheritance never left my control. Her betrayal didn't cost me financially. But emotionally, she may as well have slit my chest open and poured in every lie she ever told, one by one. We met 15 years ago at a sustainability conference in Charlotte. She was vibrant, charming, a wellness coach with a vision and no real plan. I was drawn to her optimism, her light. We married within 2 years, built a life from scratch. No kids, her choice, not mine. She always said, "My business is my baby." I respected that, at least back then I did. The first few years were good. We took hikes in the Blue Ridge Mountains, hosted friends for wine tastings, decorated the house for every minor holiday. We laughed, really laughed. But when Uncle Garrett fell ill and I had to spend 6 months in Raleigh managing his care, Selena barely visited. "Hospitals drain my energy," she'd say. I understood, or I told myself I did. When he passed, the money came, quietly, unexpectedly. She looked stunned, then interested. She started talking about scaling operations and expanding retreats to the West Coast. She said things like, "We could really do something big if we combine everything. All our assets, our time, our energy." I declined. Politely. That was the first crack. After that, she withdrew. Her phone was always face down, her laptop password changed, her explanations became shorter. One night, I caught a glimpse of a message on her smartwatch. "Can't wait for next weekend." She said it was from a supplier in Sedona. I didn't argue. I just observed. 1 week before the email, I received a call from a bank administrator I'd quietly hired to monitor activity on the trust account. Someone attempted unauthorized access using partial credentials 3 times in the last 48 hours, he said. I asked where the IP address traced back to. He replied, Scottsdale, Arizona. That night, I slept in the guest room, and now here I stood, water glass in hand, watching the moonlight hit the stones I once laid for a future that never came. Selena was gone. Her betrayal wasn't a sharp stab, but a slow rot that I had failed to name until it hollowed everything out. But I wasn't angry. I was ready. Tomorrow, I would start the process, not of reclaiming what she tried to take, but of dismantling the illusion we had built. I had spent a decade helping her climb, holding her spotlight. Now I would quietly flip the switch, and she would never see it coming. When I met Amanda 15 years ago, it felt like I'd stumbled into a chapter of my own dream. She was brilliant, confident, and stunning in that effortless way, like she didn't have to try and yet somehow owned every room she entered. Back then, I was just an architect with big ideas and not much to show for them. She was launching a wellness startup and needed someone to help design her first studio space. We talked over matcha lattes and floor plans, and by the time the construction wrapped up, I realized I wasn't just building her business, I was falling in love. 3 years later, we were married. The early years were golden. We hosted dinner parties with elegant charcuterie boards and soft jazz. We traveled when we could, New Orleans, Vancouver, Barcelona, and came home with stories and matching mugs. Our home in Savannah was everything we dreamed of. A classic Craftsman on Victory Drive with a wraparound porch Amanda adored. Hydrangeas bloomed like blue fire along the stone path I laid by hand. We didn't have children, her decision, not mine, but I respected it. She once joked, "The business is my baby," and I chose to believe her. But marriage isn't made of milestones, it's made of moments. And somewhere in those in-between spaces, we started drifting. When my Auntie Lane fell sick, I took a 6-month partial leave from work to care for her in Atlanta. Amanda visited once, maybe twice, citing her retreat schedule and emotional boundaries. Elaine passed away with dignity and grace. Her last gift to me wasn't just an inheritance, it was a reminder of resilience. She left everything to me. $587,000 carefully managed through decades of thrift, hard work, and belief in me. I came home with a quiet storm in my chest. Amanda seemed distant about the inheritance at first, but soon the questions came. Where's the money kept? Should we move it? Should we invest together? Something in her tone felt off, not concerned, but calculating. I brushed it off. I wanted to believe she saw us as a team, still. Then came the passwords. Changed. The phones turned face down. Conversations clipped. She'd leave town often, supposedly for retreats or research, but she returned different. Lighter and colder. 3 weeks before the betrayal, I received a call from Jerry, my firm's financial advisor. Someone had tried to access my trust accounts using my information. They failed the security checks, but it was enough to raise every alarm bell in my gut. I didn't confront Amanda. Not yet. I needed facts. I contacted Rita Wallace, my aunt's longtime attorney. We sat in her office while the Georgia humidity clung to the windows like guilt. I explained everything, laid it bare. Rita, with her cool demeanor and steel-trap mind, listened and then said, "Your aunt was smart to place the inheritance in an irrevocable trust. No one, not even a spouse, can touch it without violating federal law." We established a real-time monitoring system. Every login attempt, every failed password, every IP address would be tracked. Then we waited. Amanda left for another yoga retreat that Friday. She kissed me with the warmth of a waitress saying goodbye to her shift. "Might extend this one," she said. Feeling like I need a breakthrough. A breakthrough. She had no idea what was coming. Later that night, I opened our shared cloud storage, a digital filing cabinet of renovation plans and grocery lists. I searched a folder labeled Bathroom Remodel Ideas. Buried beneath tile swatches and lighting fixtures, I found it. Screenshots of my financial accounts, notes about transfer procedures, a breakdown of funds minus 20%, labeled fee. A whiteboard photo with my trust total scribbled next to the words Q3 transfer. She wasn't planning to steal the money. She had already decided it was hers. I closed the laptop. Walked into the living room Amanda had decorated in neutral tones and organic textures. For the first time in years, it felt artificial, like a showroom built on pretense. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the world go by in silence. In that moment, the betrayal didn't devastate me. It crystallized everything. Our marriage wasn't a partnership, it was a ledger. And Amanda had flipped to the final page. The next morning, I began to move, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. And Amanda, sipping wine on a balcony with her lover in Arizona, thought she had played her final card. She didn't know I'd already built the deck. I woke up that morning not to the sound of my alarm, but to an unbearable silence that filled the entire house like a fog. It was the kind of silence that doesn't just mean absence, it means abandonment. My eyes opened to the pale gray of early dawn leaking through the blinds. For a few seconds, I stared at the ceiling of the guest room where I had spent the last 3 nights, trying to remember the last time I felt truly at home in my own house. I didn't feel pain, not anymore. Something inside had shut off, like the pilot light of a furnace going out. There was only clarity now, cold, mechanical clarity. Downstairs, I moved like a man operating on instinct. I brewed my coffee black, the bitter smell a small reminder of routine in a world that no longer made sense. Every step echoed in the hollow quiet of the place Kendra and I had once called home. Her absence wasn't just physical. It had become a void in the very air. I sat down at my desk, cracked my knuckles, and opened my laptop. I wasn't here to chase ghosts. I was here for proof. I logged into the Real Trust account, the one Kendra didn't even know existed, the one my Aunt Elaine's attorney had built with enough security protocols to shame a government agency. Everything was there, untouched, not a penny moved. But the logs told a different story. 3 separate login attempts. All failed, all from the same IP address. Scottsdale, Arizona. So Kendra wasn't just off finding herself on a yoga retreat. She was in Scottsdale. And not alone. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. Digital fingerprints left in desperation. The irony? She probably thought she was being clever, hiding behind burner accounts and VPNs. But she had no idea the trust software logged everything. IP addresses, failed security questions, attempted password resets. I called Jerry, my financial advisor, and then Thomas, my attorney. I didn't rant or yell. I simply explained what I'd found, sent over the logs, and listened as they both responded with the calm precision of professionals who'd seen worse. But even Jerry sounded surprised at how detailed the intrusion was. "She really thought she'd get away with it," he murmured. "That's bold and incredibly stupid." After the calls, I sat back in my chair, the morning sun finally pouring through the window and painting warm rectangles on the hardwood floor. It was a beautiful day, the kind Kendra used to say was perfect for working in the garden. But now, the hydrangeas we planted together looked like strangers waving from a distance I could no longer cross. I stood up and walked the perimeter of the house, my eyes scanning every inch like a detective revisiting a crime scene. This wasn't a home anymore. It was evidence, and then I remembered the shared cloud drive. I opened it, expecting nothing. Just the usual, renovation sketches, receipts, Pinterest boards, but tucked away in a folder she'd carelessly labeled Spring Project Ideas was something else, a Word document. Hidden deep under 3 subfolders, its title, Transfers. I clicked. My hands clenched the desk as line after line scrolled into view. Notes. login hints, account balances. Fake explanations for wire transfers. Phrases like transfer just under 50K to avoid red flags and claim inheritance confusion if questioned. She had outlined it all like a business plan. My throat went dry. I leaned back, staring at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was espionage. She had spent weeks, maybe months, preparing a heist in slow motion. And all the while, she had been sitting across from me at the dinner table, smiling, sipping wine, pretending nothing was wrong. I saved the file, exported the metadata, uploaded backups to 3 separate locations. I wasn't going to let her claim it was a mistake, not this time. That night I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the porch staring out at the street, watching cars pass and neighbors walk their dogs, all blissfully unaware of the war quietly raging behind my front door. She had made her move. Now it was my turn. The next morning, I didn't hesitate. By 8 o'clock a.m., I was already downtown in the brick and glass office of Thomas Webb, seated across from him while he scanned the evidence I had sent him the night before. He didn't say much at first, only furrowed his brow, nodding slowly as he scrolled through the screenshots of Kendra's documents and IP logs. Then he leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said, "This isn't just betrayal, Miles. This is premeditated fraud." I knew that already, but hearing it from a divorce lawyer, one with 30 years of experience and the calm tone of someone who's watched hundreds of marriages implode, made it feel real in a different way. We spent the next hour outlining our plan. There would be no confrontation, no shouting matches, no phone calls begging for explanations or closure. That wasn't what this was about anymore. This was about protecting what was left of my life and making sure she didn't take any more of it. Thomas was efficient. He had already drafted the divorce paperwork, just waiting for a trigger. Now he had one. He picked up the phone, called Rita Wallace, and within minutes the two of them were exchanging documents. Rita confirmed the trust logs matched the suspicious activity on her end. Timestamps, device fingerprints, all from Arizona, all from Kendra. That afternoon, I received a text. "Did you get my email?" it said. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, "That's all you have to say?" Still nothing from me. It wasn't silence out of rage, it was strategy. I wanted her to stew in uncertainty, let her wonder if her house of cards had started to collapse. By 5 o'clock p.m., the papers were ready. I signed them without a second thought and sent them back to Thomas. I didn't need to reread the terms. The only thing I cared about was that the inheritance remained untouched and that any attempt she made to steal it was now on record. That night, I got a call from Thomas. "We just received confirmation," he said. "The law firm she contacted. They're already backing off. Once we showed them the trust documents and your screenshots, they told her to seek different counsel." Did they say why? They didn't have to. They don't want their name tied to a fraud case. I hung up the phone, leaned back in my chair, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I exhaled fully. Not because it was over, but because it had finally begun. The next morning, I received a second text from Kendra. "You're being childish," it read. "This doesn't have to be difficult." I almost laughed. Childish. After months of deception, password changes, and carefully orchestrated lies, she was calling me immature for not responding to her theft like it was a misunderstanding. Instead of replying, I forwarded the latest bank statements to Thomas. He called within the hour. "She's moved close to $180,000 from your joint accounts into an external credit union under her name. Same pattern, small transfers that grew bolder over time. Any idea what she's doing with it? She rented an apartment in Scottsdale under her maiden name." Of course. She wasn't just stealing. She was disappearing. And yet she still had the nerve to act like this could be handled civilly. Thomas didn't think it was time to go public yet. No emergency hearings, no public spectacle. He said the more we let her think she was still in control, the better the eventual settlement would be. I agreed, but I needed one thing. "Thomas," I said, "I want to know who he is." There was a pause. "You mean the man in the photo?" "Yes." We can find out, quietly. Good. I don't need confrontation. I just need the full picture. That night, I walked through the house again, looking not for memories, but for exit wounds. The places where the life I built had started to bleed out, the cracks in the walls, the spots on the floor she'd always insisted I fix but never really cared about. Every object suddenly held weight. A souvenir from a trip, a wine glass from a dinner party, a yoga mat rolled in the corner. They weren't things anymore. They were lies in physical form. When I met Amanda 15 years ago, it felt like I'd stumbled into a chapter of my own dream. She was brilliant, confident, and stunning in that effortless way, like she didn't have to try, and yet somehow owned every room she entered. Back then, I was just an architect with big ideas and not much to show for them. She was launching a wellness startup and needed someone to help design her first studio space. We talked over matcha lattes and floor plans, and by the time the construction wrapped up, I realized I wasn't just building her business, I was falling in love. 3 years later, we were married. The early years were golden. We hosted dinner parties with elegant charcuterie boards and soft jazz. We traveled when we could, New Orleans, Vancouver, Barcelona, and came home with stories and matching mugs. Our home in Savannah was everything we dreamed of. A classic craftsman on Victory Drive with a wraparound porch Amanda adored. Hydrangeas bloomed like blue fire along the stone path I laid by hand. We didn't have children, her decision, not mine, but I respected it. She once joked, "The business is my baby," and I chose to believe her. But marriage isn't made of milestones, it's made of moments. And somewhere in those in-between spaces, we started drifting. When my Aunt Elaine fell sick, I took a 6-month partial leave from work to care for her in Atlanta. Amanda visited once, maybe twice, citing her retreat schedule and emotional boundaries. Elaine passed away with dignity and grace. Her last gift to me wasn't just an inheritance, it was a reminder of resilience. She left everything to me. $587,000 carefully managed through decades of thrift, hard work, and belief in me. I came home with a quiet storm in my chest. Amanda seemed distant about the inheritance at first, but soon the questions came. Where's the money kept? Should we move it? Should we invest together? Something in her tone felt off, not concerned but calculating. I brushed it off. I wanted to believe she saw us as a team, still. Then came the passwords, changed. The phones turned face down, conversations clipped. She'd leave town often, supposedly for retreats or research, but she returned different, lighter and colder. 3 weeks before the betrayal, I received a call from Jerry, my firm's financial advisor. Someone had tried to access my trust accounts using my information. They failed the security checks, but it was enough to raise every alarm bell in my gut. I didn't confront Amanda. Not yet. I needed facts. I contacted Rita Wallace, my aunt's longtime attorney. We sat in her office while the Georgia humidity clung to the windows like guilt. I explained everything, laid it bare. Rita, with her cool demeanor and steel-trap mind, listened and then said, "Your aunt was smart to place the inheritance in an irrevocable trust. No one, not even a spouse, can touch it without violating federal law." We established a real-time monitoring system. Every login attempt, every failed password, every IP address would be tracked. Then, we waited. Amanda left for another yoga retreat that Friday. She kissed me with the warmth of a waitress saying goodbye to her shift. "Might extend this one," she said. Feeling like I need a breakthrough. A breakthrough. She had no idea what was coming. Later that night, I opened our shared cloud storage, a digital filing cabinet of renovation plans and grocery lists. I searched a folder labeled Bathroom Remodel Ideas. Buried beneath tile swatches and lighting fixtures, I found it. Screenshots of my financial accounts, notes about transfer procedures, a breakdown of funds minus 20%, labeled Fee. A whiteboard photo with my trust total scribbled next to the words Q3 transfer. She wasn't planning to steal the money. She had already decided it was hers. I closed the laptop. Walked into the living room Amanda had decorated in neutral tones and organic textures. For the first time in years, it felt artificial, like a showroom built on pretense. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the world go by in silence. In that moment, the betrayal didn't devastate me. It crystallized everything. Our marriage wasn't a partnership, it was a ledger. And Amanda had flipped to the final page. The next morning, I began to move, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. And Amanda, sipping wine on a balcony with her lover in Arizona, thought she had played her final card. She didn't know I'd already built the deck. The morning I received the inheritance email from Kendra, I deliberately refused to react emotionally. Instead, I focused on the plan I'd quietly laid the groundwork for over the past few weeks. I got out of bed early, before sunrise, to savor the stillness in the guest room where I'd been sleeping since I sensed things were unraveling. I walked into the study, shutting the door gently, and opened my laptop. My to-do list sat there, a sequence of calculated steps. I logged into the trust company's portal to confirm the funds were still intact in the irrevocable trust. They were untouched, exactly as planned, because the trust structure legally shielded them. Relief washed through me. I'd made the right call to move them months earlier, preparing for a betrayal that felt inevitable. Next, I reviewed the screenshots and documents I'd stashed in the shared Google Drive. Screenshots of passwords, account statements, access logs. I copied them onto an encrypted USB drive labeled Personal Archive and placed it in the lockbox I'd rented the previous week. Every tidbit of evidence showed that Kendra's emotional distance wasn't a coincidence, and the inheritance transfer was planned far in advance. I dropped an email to Rita and Jerry, asking for an alert whenever any changes occurred to the trust or joint accounts. They confirmed receipt. Now, every failed login or unauthorized withdrawal would ping me instantly. I leaned back, letting the weight of it sink in. I was ready. She wasn't. At 8 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table wearing the same crisp blue shirt and jeans I wore to client meetings. My expression was calm, intentional. When my phone buzzed with a message from Kendra, "Did you see the email?" I replied with, "Yes, we'll discuss things later." By 10 a.m., I was at Thomas Webb's downtown office again. He already had paperwork prepared to file for divorce, citing financial misconduct. We cleared through documents quickly. I didn't want to drag the process longer than necessary. Thomas gave me a steely look. "Once we file, you'll need to stay strict. No emotional calls, no attempts at reconciliation until it's over. She's going to fight this." I nodded. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about dignity, containment, peace. After lunch, I received another update from Rita. 3 more failed attempts were logged in the trust portal, all originating from Kendra's getaway in Sedona. Dates, times, IP addresses, evidence lined up like a frightening timeline of premeditation. Another building block in the case, I thought, folding my letter of attorney into my blazer pocket. That afternoon, I visited Brightstone Bank. Harold handed me printed statements showing escalating monthly withdrawals from our joint checking account. They started small, several thousand here and there, but escalated to nearly $50,000 months ago. The total exceeded $175,000. The receiving account? Northern Lakes Credit Union in Arizona. The money had vanished into a hidden account Kendra controlled. I collected everything in a neat pile and stepped out, breathing in fresh air like I'd finally been given oxygen. That evening, I sent an email to Kendra's attorney, David Lawrence, forwarding the latest statements and alert logs, asking for confirmation when he'd received them. Then I logged into my new email account, one untraceable to Kendra, and drafted a clean, objective message. Proposal, division of assets. The tone was cool and businesslike. Assets to be retained. Inheritance trust assets, fully protected. Our home, lightly mortgaged, sold after settlement. Remaining joint funds, less amounts withdrawn. Assets to return. $89,275,000, half of what was withdrawn from joint accounts. Conditions. non-disclosure agreement regarding marital details. Payment within 48 hours of final signing. If agreed by end of the week, I will not pursue criminal charges. I sent it with a sense of finality. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I was offering closure in exchange for her compliance. As I sat back, I realized I was tired, emotionally sober, strategically prepared, and finally, free. I watched the sun set through the window of my empty house and whispered to myself, this is the start of rebuilding, not just what was lost, but who I chose to become. The next morning, the real work would begin. Saturday morning came quietly, cloaked in that eerie stillness that only descends after emotional storms. I brewed my coffee slowly, taking my time as if the simple act could stall the inevitable fallout of what was unfolding. Outside, the early sun bathed the porch in soft gold, casting long shadows across the hydrangeas we had once planted together. They looked healthy, flourishing, unlike us. By mid-morning, my lawyer Thomas called. David Lawrence has withdrawn, he said, without even a greeting. Officially filed the notice. Kendra no longer has representation. I exhaled. That alone spoke volumes. A seasoned attorney bailing mid-case meant something had spooked him, likely the full extent of the evidence we'd already supplied. That was the first domino, and I suspected more would fall soon. Around noon, my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it was before answering. Kendra. Her voice was clipped, demanding, "What the hell did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "You tried to steal nearly $600,000. The system caught you, that's all." Her tone shifted instantly. "You're being cruel, Miles." "I didn't actually transfer anything." "But you tried," I replied. "Repeatedly. That's the problem." A long pause. Then, "We need to talk. Please." I didn't respond immediately. My silence did more than words. Finally, I said, "Talk to your new lawyer if you can find one." I hung up. No yelling, no grand monologue. Just a click and silence. By evening, Rita emailed again. The trust company had completed their internal investigation. Multiple logs showed failed access attempts from Sedona, confirmed by timestamps, device IDs, and IP addresses. Even more damning, one access happened from our home Wi-Fi while I was out of town. The report had already been sent to the legal department. They would decide whether to escalate to criminal charges. For now, they noted, no action required from you at this time, but be aware this path remains open. I closed the email, walked to the liquor cabinet, and poured 2 fingers of scotch. The same bottle we had saved for our 15th wedding anniversary. It would never be opened by both of us now. That night, I sat in the living room with all the lights off, just the soft hum of the ceiling fan above. I looked around the house, the one we'd remodeled, the one that had once echoed with plans and dreams. Now it echoed with absence. Not just hers, but mine, too. The version of me that had hoped, forgiven, compromised. That version was fading, replaced by something quieter but stronger. The next morning brought another twist. Thomas called early. "She's hired Philip Barnes." My stomach tightened. Barnes had a reputation. Sharp, ruthless, expensive. "He's demanding an emergency hearing to contest the financial misconduct claim," Thomas continued. "Says Kendra has evidence that all the account moves were discussed and agreed upon." I didn't laugh, but I did smile bitterly. "Let him bring it," I said. "And let's give him something to choke on." That afternoon, we compiled a legal package and delivered it to Barnes' office by courier. Access logs with IP addresses and timestamps, copies of account withdrawal statements, photos of Kendra's secret apartment lease in Scottsdale, Frank the neighbor's notarized statement about Jason's visits, screenshots from the cloud folder showing Kendra's handwritten plans to access my accounts. By 5 p.m., Barnes had seen enough. Thomas called me back, barely containing his satisfaction. He wants to settle. Quickly. "What's the offer?" I asked. "She keeps what she's already taken. No more claims. You keep the house, the trust, everything else." "No deal," I said. She gives back half of what she took from the joint account and signs a non-disclosure agreement. In return, I won't pursue fraud charges. There was a long pause. Then Thomas said, "You'll get more in court." "I don't want more," I replied. "I want done." That night, I didn't feel victorious, just hollow. The war had been waged, and the battlefield was silent now. But this silence wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Monday arrived draped in gray cloud and courtroom fluorescence. I parked early, sat behind the wheel for several minutes, and steadied my breathing the way an architect studies blueprints before demolition. Inside, the courthouse smelled of stale coffee and floor wax, nothing noble or cinematic about it, just municipal corridors and tired fluorescent tubes that hum like nervous witnesses. Thomas met me outside the small consultation room the clerk had assigned us. He wore the same navy suit he reserves for depositions, the one he jokingly calls his blood repellent. "Barnes and Kendra are here," he said. "They've reviewed your counteroffer." "He claims it's harsh." "Harsh?" I scoffed. "It's mercy in a contract." Thomas smiled thinly. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." We entered the room. Kendra sat at the far end of the conference table, posture pinned straight, a white blouse too crisp to be comfortable. Barnes, every hair lacquered into compliance, flipped through papers with performative nonchalance. Kendra's eyes found me for half a second, then slid away like rain off glass. No greetings, no nostalgia, only paperwork. Thomas pushed the revised settlement across to Barnes. Date stamped, notarized. "Funds wired back within 24 hours, he recited. Barnes cleared his throat. "My client is willing to return 40%, not 50D. And she refuses the non-disclosure." "Then we proceed to a fraud hearing," Thomas interrupted. He tapped the thick evidence binder. "And introduce every IP log, every screenshot, every notarized statement." Barnes's jaw tightened. He turned to Kendra. They whispered, a tiny storm of frantic syllables. I watched her shoulders rise and fall, a silent metronome counting down the death of our marriage. Finally, she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Fine," Barnes said. "Full 50%, duh. NDA included, limited to financial affairs." Thomas raised an eyebrow at me, silently asking. I answered with a small nod. "Deal?" Barnes slid the agreement to Kendra. She signed on the indicated lines. Her pen shook, the ink trembled like a seismograph. When she finished, Thomas passed me the papers. I signed with a steadier hand than I expected. 12 years of shared life reduced to 3 signatures and a wire transfer confirmation code. For a moment, nobody moved. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to pause. Then Barnes gathered his papers, muttered something about timelines, and exited. Kendra stayed seated, fingers curled around the pen. The room was suddenly too quiet. "I'll arrange pickup for the rest of your belongings," I said, the words sounding rehearsed. "Thank you," she murmured. A pause. "Miles, I never meant for this to explode." I almost laughed, soft, incredulous. "You hired a wrecking crew and handed them the blueprints. Explosions were inevitable." She exhaled shakily. "I thought we were already over, just waiting to admit it." "Maybe we were," I conceded. "But you chose theft over conversation." Another silence, wider than the room itself. At last she stood. "Goodbye, Miles." "Good luck, Kendra." She left. The door clicked shut. The chapter, finally, sealed itself. That afternoon, Thomas and I walked the riverfront to decompress. Cypress trees dipped their roots into brown water. Tourist boats sputtered past, carrying people who would never know this piece of my history. "She'll wire the money tonight," Thomas said. "If she doesn't, we press charges tomorrow." "She will," I replied. "She's done fighting." We stopped at a railing overlooking the current. I pictured my Aunt Elaine standing beside me, wind tugging at her nurse's scrubs, telling me to check the load-bearing walls before trusting any structure. She'd been right, about buildings, about people. "Rita already drew up the foundation charter," I told Thomas. "Elaine Hartley Memorial Fund. First scholarships go out this fall." He clapped my shoulder. "Turning a mess into mortar. Elaine would approve." That night, alone in the loft, I opened my laptop. A new email waited. Northern Lakes Credit Union. Incoming wire transfer completed. $8,975 deposited. Subject line, paid in full. No body text. No apology, just bookkeeping. I closed the laptop, walked to the window, and let Savannah's nightly chorus, distant horns, cicadas, muffled laughter, wash through the screen. Relief wasn't thunderous. It arrived like a tide, inch by inch, carrying away debris. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Take care of yourself, Miles." I'm truly sorry. I deleted it without reply. Closure can't be delivered via SMS. I slept a deep, uninterrupted sleep, the kind I hadn't known in years. 3 weeks later, I met Jerry and a young architect he'd been mentoring at a small bistro downtown. Her name was Celeste Vargas. Sharp eyes, ink-stained fingers, laugh like wind chimes. She spoke passionately about designing public libraries that double as storm shelters. Halfway through dinner, she apologized for nerding out, and I realized I'd been smiling the whole time. When the meal ended, she extended a hand. "Pleasure, Mr. Hartley." "Call me Miles," I said. "And if you ever want a collaborator on those libraries, reach out." Walking home, I felt the city differently. Same streets, new residents. Grief had been wide. Possibility felt wider. At the loft, I drafted an email to Rita. "Please allocate the Northern Lakes refund to an additional scholarship slot." Before hitting send, I added a postscript. "Tell the board we'll call this one the Second Blueprint Award. For students who know buildings like lives can be redesigned." I hit send. Then I opened the balcony door, stepped into the cool night, and let the future, unmapped, unscripted, settle onto my shoulders like the gentlest of blueprints. I sat in the empty house, now just a hollow shell echoing footsteps and regrets. My gaze wandered over the living room where Kendra and I had once danced after wine-filled dinners, the kitchen where she'd hummed while slicing fruit, the staircase we used to race up when we were too drunk to act our age. Every memory now came wrapped in irony, like a cruel joke I didn't know I was a part of until the punchline hit. She thought she could steal the money and rewrite the ending of our story without consequence. But Kendra had misjudged one thing. I wasn't a man who went down quietly. She believed that silence meant weakness. In truth, it meant preparation. While she was off in Scottsdale playing soulmate with a yoga instructor turned spiritual fraud, I was building my counterattack with the patience of an architect who knows the true strength lies in the foundation. Thomas delivered the evidence to Barnes's office by mid-afternoon. The file was thick. Trust account access logs, banking activity, IP addresses traced to her retreat, even Frank's notarized statement identifying Jason Berkeley. Barnes must have opened that package expecting negotiation leverage, but what he got was a blueprint for collapse. By 5 p.m., Thomas received a call. Barnes requested an urgent meeting to discuss a settlement. Not a word about the emergency hearing they had filed. The predator had become the prey. When Thomas relayed their offer, Kendra keeps what she already took, makes no further claims, and walks away clean. I didn't hesitate. "Counter," I said, my voice steady. "She returns half of what she took from the joint accounts and signs a non-disclosure agreement. In return, I won't pursue criminal fraud charges." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "You could get more." "I don't want more. I want done." And I meant it. I wasn't trying to squeeze her dry. I wasn't looking for vengeance. I wanted my life back, minus the rot she'd infected it with. I wanted clean air, clean books, clean conscience. The morning of the hearing, we met in a consultation room at the courthouse. Kendra and Barnes walked in together. Her eyes darted across the table, searching for some sign of weakness, a soft landing. She found none. Thomas laid out the terms, his tone flat and final. She would wire back $89,275 within 24 hours. She would make no claims against the inheritance. She would sign the NDA. In exchange, I would walk away without pressing charges. Across the glass table, she looked visibly shaken for the first time. Barnes leaned in and whispered something. She nodded, slowly, her shoulders slumping. And then, without reading, she signed. Her handwriting trembled, not from the pen, but from the weight of knowing she had lost the war before she even knew a battle had begun. I slid an envelope toward her. She looked at it, wary. "What is it?" she asked. "Passwords?" "To the cloud storage, the alarm, the utilities account. Whatever you need to retrieve whatever you left behind." She stared at me, confusion playing behind her tired eyes. "It was never about the money," I said, voice low and final. "That would have been easier." She didn't respond. She just stood, clutched the envelope like a lifeline, and left the room with Barnes beside her. She didn't look back. 6 months later, the house was sold to a young couple with twins. They fell in love with the wraparound porch and the hydrangeas Kendra used to tend. I moved into a smaller loft downtown, fewer memories. More peace, less space, but more room to breathe. I took the refunded money she wired back and deposited it directly into the foundation I built in Aunt Elaine's name, a scholarship program for orphaned teens who wanted to study architecture. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from Macon. Her application essay, "Designing Spaces That Heal." That night, I walked along the Riverwalk Kendra and I once dreamed of opening a wellness studio beside him. I stood on the bench we'd carved our initials into, the rain beginning to fall, and I let it wash over me. I thought of Elaine, of what she would say if she saw me now. Probably. Good. Now build something better. The morning of what would have been their courtroom battle dawned not with fury, but with resolution. Miles stood by the window of the courthouse's consultation room, sipping plain black coffee from a paper cup. He wasn't jittery or uncertain. In fact, he felt eerily calm. It wasn't the calm before a storm, but the stillness after surviving one. The hallway outside was quiet, except for the faint murmur of shuffling papers and court staff prepping for the docket. Kendra was late. Thomas entered, holding a freshly printed settlement agreement. It was straightforward. Kendra would return half of the $178,000 she had siphoned from their joint accounts. She would make no claims on the inheritance or any remaining marital assets. In return, Miles would not pursue fraud charges. The non-disclosure clause would ensure their marriage wouldn't become gossip fodder. No one would profit from their pain. When Kendra finally arrived, she walked in not as the wellness guru she once pretended to be, but as a woman cornered. Her posture was taut, and her lips were pressed into a tight defensive line. Beside her stood Philip Barnes, sharp suit and sharper smile, but even he looked weary, as if defending her had become more burden than strategy. Barnes reviewed the documents, then whispered something. She hesitated, but eventually signed, her pen strokes deliberate, each letter trembling. Miles watched her across the table, not with hatred, not with victory, just with clarity. She looked up once, their eyes met, and he saw something he hadn't in years: vulnerability, maybe even shame. But it no longer had the power to cut him. After she left, Miles remained seated for a long while, letting the silence wash over him. It was over, not in the way movies wrap things up with big speeches or slam doors, but in the quiet way real life ends things. Signatures, agreements, a final envelope slid across the table. 6 months passed. The Craftsman home sold quickly to a young couple expecting twins. They loved the wraparound porch and the hydrangeas, never knowing the ache embedded in its walls. Miles moved into a modest loft downtown, just 2 rooms, brick walls, and enough space to think. The scholarship foundation he'd launched in Aunt Elaine's name was already supporting 3 students. One of them, a 17-year-old aspiring architect from rural Georgia, sent a letter. "Your scholarship made me believe my ideas matter." Miles framed it. Then, one autumn evening, a small envelope arrived at his loft. No return address, just his name in clean script. Inside was a cashier's check for $89,275, the exact amount Kendra had promised. No note. No explanation, just closure, in paper form. Miles didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just nodded. That night, he walked down to the riverside where he and Kendra had once dreamed of opening a wellness retreat. The river didn't remember them. It kept flowing, just like he would.